All right, let's continue with the eighth player in this series of 2025 free agent offensive guards for the Miami Dolphins. And like I've said in all these videos, I'm looking at these players through the lens of how do they fit into the Dolphins scheme, right? If I'm ranking these guards overall, it could look much different. The current rankings are up on the screen for you to look at. And the idea here is that we are going to find clips of run plays in scenarios where the yards to go are 1 or 2 yards. And the idea behind that is that if a player can play well in those situations, then they're probably going to do pretty well in the more neutral stuff. And that also tends to carry over to the passing game as well. Not looking to pull all good or all bad plays. It's just, I go through and try to pull the ones that I feel are relevant for these conversations. Not going to be the same number of plays that we look at for each player. And again, these are not the only plays that I personally look at before we get to the rankings portion of it. There's a lot more that I look at that go into that ranking when we get there and update it. James Daniels of the Pittsburgh Steelers is the next player that we're going to take a look at. And that number of plays thing is relevant here because when we look at the number of plays that James Daniel was part of that were 1 to 2 yards to go that were run plays, I think there was only 10 plays that came up. So we're only going to look at 3 of those, and then we're going to get on to a few extra things from that. But it is a small sample size for James Daniels in terms of this review. So we've got him here at right guard, number 78. And this is another thing, I talked about before, not going to look at a whole lot of quarterback sneaks, but I think that based on the sample size, it's kind of important for Daniels because lack of movement here, right? We're getting off the ball. We've got a linebacker stepping up in the gap there and just not getting a ton of movement from James Daniels there, right? I would expect a guard to be able to get a little more movement on a linebacker standing up in the A gap. Next play here, back to you. So he's on your right side as you're looking at it against the Broncos here. And this play is going to be a counter concept where the guard is kicking out and you've got your F or H tight end here is leading up through. So James Daniel is looking to kick out this edge player. And again, movement skills are there with James Daniels, but the explosion on impact is not there. He's getting out of there quick in pretty good position, but you can see that on contact, he's losing balance as well. So, not an awful rep here, but, I'm not also going to call this a strength of his either based on that balance issue. Next one here, so we're looking at the Falcons, and this is going to be outside zone to the right. And, here's kind of where his athleticism can shine a bit when he gets going horizontal and running. In this situation, this was not necessarily a combo block on number 90. This was more of a true double team at the point of attack here. And 77 does a good job of getting to the outside, which allows Daniels to fit in on the inside there and be able to run through. And, they obviously finish with him on the ground. But this is somewhere that I think that Daniels can do well when the defensive linemen are on the move. His athleticism allows, Daniels to use that to his advantage. Now, the rest of the plays that we're going to look at here for Daniels is going to be still run plays, but it's going to be 3 to 6 yards to go, so it's not obvious run or pass situations here. A little more neutral, but just with the small number of plays that we had from our original filter, I felt it was important to include some additional film work on Daniels as part of this review. So we got him here against the Falcons. And this play here is going to be outside zone again. And on this one, right, this is more of a solo block for Daniels. He's even here. And this is where we'd really like to see him pressing with that left hand through the chest and trying to get some movement. What ends up happening is that defender is able to shed the block. And it's not, I know he's on the ground, right? We talk about Liam Eichenberg all the time with the Dolphins being on the ground. This is not the worst thing that could happen here because once he's in that position, right, once he is right there, the running back should be reading the leverage there and hitting this outside. So if this defender wants to go to the inside, he's taking himself out of the play essentially. Um, Not going to say that this is a great block and there's not stuff that can be done better here, but despite being on the ground, right, this could be a lot worse. Now he's facing you against the Broncos. So this is going to be inside zone to the left. And Fields ends up keeping this, right? But this is still a true, read option here. So we'd really like to see Daniels getting more movement on this defender. So this is basically a 2-eye defender. And we can see that when Daniels engages, right, he's in solid position there. But that defender just has a better anchor than what Daniels does power. And you can see that, Daniels ends up on one foot as that defender's pressing him, which is not a good place to be as a offensive guard. On the right side of your screen again here against the Broncos. And now we're getting outside zone again. So now this is a different way to handle outside zone. You can win in different ways. In that previous outside right clip, we saw Daniels trying to get to the outside shoulder and press. On this one, he's using his superior athleticism just to get outside and get those hips around and wall that defender off. Now, you can't do this all the time, but this is still, when you look at that, the quickness and athleticism, that it's something that Daniels has and uses to his advantage. And in this play, you can see how that is a plus for him. Now we're looking at film against the Falcons. Outside zone again, and this is similar to that the short yardage outside zone that we looked at earlier, where he's part of the combo block with 77. But in this case, there is a secondary assignment as part of that combo block, and that's going to be this backside linebacker. And this is a really good job by Daniels of, being able to help number 77, but still having the body control to be able to stop, sink, and get that linebacker as well. Especially when we look at some of the bigger guards that we've looked at in these film reviews, this is something that's missing, that ability to transition from the combo block to that second level defender. All right, now we're getting inside zone again. This time you can see he's working with the center. Center's trying to leave that, probably trying to leave a little early, and he's getting held. But you can see this defensive tackle is doing a really good job of anchoring down, and that there's just not a whole lot that Daniels is able to do with that. And then last one here for Daniels on the right side. So this is going to be backside of outside zone. This is kind of where when his high-level athleticism doesn't win and he's not able to get around and seal that off, right? The lack of power shows up in his inability to continue to win here. Like, this is not a bad position from here, but you can see that, I think that's Grady Jarrett, does a good job of being able to press him off and then being able to, slow down and affect that play. So just another area that, I feel like the lack of strength from James Daniels shows up. So now we talk about where we rank him, right? And if you're looking at the old school Denver model of what a zone blocking offensive lineman should look like, then James Daniels exactly what you're looking for. He's a smaller player. He is highly athletic, but that's just not the NFL today because you can't cut the same way that you could back in the 90s. I do think that there is a lot of value in having a guards specifically that are able to hold up at the point of attack better than what James Daniel is. I do have significant concerns with his lack of power and how that would translate into the Dolphins scheme. Um, with that in mind, obviously not going to have him above these top three guys. Will Fries has some of the same issues, but at the same time, I feel like Fries shows a little better power than what Daniels does. Trey Smith, we talked about before, has some really ugly losses, but physically he's very talented. And then Will Hernandez, you know, he's kind of the anti James Daniel in the sense that he's a little less athletic, but still does enough in the scheme. And I think we know now that I don't have a high opinion of Mekhi Becton in this scheme. So James Daniels, for me, would come in just below Will Hernandez. Um, Similar to talking about Will Fries, like I don't feel like a guy like Fries or Daniels can be the top guard in your system. If you had both of those guys, Fries and Daniels, I think that your offense would have a really tough time being able to run in the short yardage. But either of those guys, if you were to get somebody else that's more powerful on the other side, and you can cover up the power with the athleticism on the other side, I think you can still get by with somebody like this. Um, just as a reminder, these rankings are, we're not talking about contracts. So I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, hey, I've got, let's say, $10 million, just throwing a number out there. Which of these guys would I want in the system? And this is the order that I would put these guys. And I also don't, we're not talking about injury status, which some of these guys obviously have a extensive injury status. And those are all conversations that need to be had, right? We can't just look at it and say these guys can play on the field. These are the guys that we need to go after. We can't just look at it and say these are the cheapest guys. Those are the guys that we need to go after. And we can't just look at it and say, well, these guys are never injured. Those are the guys we have to go after. It's got to be a discussion of all three things. And for me, the start of that discussion is, can they play? If they can't play, then the other parts of it don't matter. So again, as we're talking about this and working through it, this list is basically the can they play list. And then, kind of leaving it up to you to be able to look at it and say, this player is going to cost too much. I'm not interested in him. Or this player is injured too often. I'm not interested in him. And then you can adjust your rankings from there. And maybe we'll get to where I stand on that stuff later. But for now, for the purposes of these videos, I am just looking at these players and saying, can they play in this system? And if they can play, which are the